Hello and welcome to ConTinual, the convention that's always here when you need us. Today, we're going to be talking about how to write animals. And with us, we have a great group of panelists who I will let them introduce themselves now. Okay, Gini?
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Cat and Kitty Cat series for dog books, and I write under a variety of other pen names and in all lengths and all genres, and in almost everything I write, somehow animals slip in.
Okay, Mel?
Hey everybody, I'm Mel Todd. I'm the author of the Twisted Luck series and the Kaje Chronicles, and I'm rapidly getting in almost as many anthologies as Jenny is.
Cool, oh cool. Okay.
Hi, I'm Kaje Harper. I write gay romance in pretty much all of the subgenres from fantasy to paranormal, contemporary, mystery, historical, and like the rest of the panelists, the animals do sneak in to just about everything that I write somewhere along the line, and sometimes play a pretty big starring role in some of the stories, particularly in the contemporary.
Okay, Becky?
I'm Becky Turner, and I write contemporary romance. My series is a Clock Tower romance series, and I like to write animals. They always make things more interesting.
Okay, and Susan?
Hi, I'm Susan Griffith. I'm one half of the Clay and Susan Griffith writing team. We write historical fantasy with the Vampire Empire series and the Crowning Key series from Dell. And we also write TV tie-ins, comic books, short stories, you name it. And we also tend to put animals in mainly because that seems to be a great way of balancing some characters out and giving some great insights. And we enjoy just writing about animals, and we can.
Okay, well, why is it, everybody seems to enjoy writing about animals here, but for writers as a whole, everybody tells you to focus on your characters, the humans, the dialogue, this and that. Why is it important to write about animals when they're not really able to hold a conversation for the most part?
You haven't met my animals.
I was just saying, speak for your own series, my dear. Mine are all fairly chatty.
Heck, my cats hold conversations. I mean, yeah. I guess just to lay groundwork, and I know that Becky and I talked about this. I grew up on a farm. I did 4-H. I raised rabbits, goats, pigs, chickens, ducks. We had a next door neighbor with horses. We raised drop calves, milked, slaughtered, did all of that. So it's not just when I'm saying, oh, I have cats or dogs. I'm actually talking, I have dealt with the range of animals. And most people, usually, at least most urbanites, have only dealt with cats or dogs, maybe the occasional exotic pet. Livestock is a different world. And people lots of times apply the same behavior and reactions that they get from their cats and dogs, which are horribly, horribly domesticated, and apply it to livestock. That doesn't work.
Well, but how many times do you have to write about livestock, for example? I mean, I have written entire...
If you're writing a Western,
yep.
Or anything set in the West, you're going to have a horse at least, and horses definitely. Some horses are like great big dogs, and some horses are not. And you can't, some horses are really jerks, and and some horses hate you, and some horses are just like, oh, she brought me sugar, I love her so much, right? They're different, just like every other animal is different, but they are not the same as a cat. They're not the same as a horse. And if you're going in, and now it's cattle ranching, if you're doing a historical or even a contemporary, any kind of thing set in the West, and or in Calgary or any other Australia, any place they're doing cattle behave very differently. And I'm kind of a cross between a city girl and a country girl because I grew up in an agricultural county and could not wait to get to the city, but so fast, right? But yeah, I mean, cattle spook, And that's a scary thing. And so there's a lot of different things to do it, but I'm going to get quickly back to your original question, which was why. Animals, we're humans, and we're humans writing for humans. And you know what humans do? Humans domesticate animals. And they have them as pets, and they eat them, and we do all these things with animals, and we anthropomorphize them. Okay, we watch Disney movies with talking and singing birds and cats and dogs and mice and everything else. We are a very animal centric culture, and honestly, that goes through most of the cultures in the world. Human beings like to domesticate animals. So if you try to pretend animals don't exist, it's kind of like having a character who doesn't have a phone. There's no reason for them not to have a phone. They're not being off the grid. They just don't have a phone. It just doesn't ring true if you're writing somebody in today's society. So in most cases, we've domesticated animals for a really long time. So pretending that they're not a part of your character and their characterization is you're leaving something out. It's like leaving out one of the senses, but different. So I think you need, if you're going to make believable characters, you need to have a reason. You need to have a reason why they don't have an animal. And if they do have an animal, then you need to have one that that works within your story. And now everybody else gets to talk.
And I think that's the important thing, is does the animal character work for the story that you're writing? For us, it was a catalyst. It was the bridging point between one character and another. And the main purpose, and we didn't expect the animal to really have a huge starring role, but he wound up gathering, it was the cat that Greyfriar had, because he was a vampire. He had no tactile touch because he was a vampire, because they don't have those, they have like a deadened skin, which is why they don't go into shock when you kill them. But since he didn't have any tactile touch, he thought cats were interesting because he just kind of had feral cats around. But he wound up, that was the bridge between making the connection with the human girl, the human woman that he meets up, because it's the cat that bridges, and he gives her a gift at the end. And to me, this connection that they had between the animal was the bridging point for them. And without that, I mean, it could have been anything, but it was far more interesting choosing the cat, because the cat really had no care about, anything. He wasn't going to be, it could have been a horse, it could have been a bird, it could have been anything, but the cat made the perfect choice for us. First of all, there's a lot of cats buried at Edinburgh Castle, and we had there's a whole thing for setting, but just to throw it in may not have worked if it was just hanging around the house. It could have been there, but this time it had a reason to be there. And I think that's something people need to consider when you're writing stories. If they're going to be there, why should they be there? Is it a positive for the story? Is it going to move the story along? Is it something the character needs? And those are things you have to consider.
It's a very useful tool.
Grow. It is.
It helps you reveal the human character's development. So how they treat the animal, what they choose. I mean, if your character has a parrot versus a puppy, that says something about them and what their development is and what their attitude
insane
animals is. If they have a big dog and they don't go home and walk it when they're supposed to go home and walk it, I mean, that, again, says something. If they have a pet and they prioritize it over this person they're trying to get together with, I mean, there are a lot of ways that you can both reveal your character and reveal tension in your character's world and how they interact with people by using how they interact with the animals as kind of a reveal. You could turn someone into a villain in 2.5 seconds by having them kick a dog. That tells the reader far more about what this character is like than you could in maybe a page of describing what their past has been and all the rest of this. So kind of their attitudes and their interactions with the animals around them gives us some very good clues about who you're talking about and how they.
You can also use it as an opposing view too, because if you've got a character that's behaving to the other humans in the book, maybe they're grumbling, or, you know, mean or coming off a little bit abrupt. And then you can also show them totally different with the animal. So it gives that other piece without telling the reader, you're showing the reader what's going on rather than telling them about this thing. So it's kind of nice to show both sides of it. So I have this character and people don't like her, but on the meantime, you know, she takes in this stray dog.
The other nice thing is animals aren't human, and so they don't react the way humans do. So in a situation where any intelligent person, let's take horses. Horses are great because I've actually seen this, unfortunately. If a room is on fire, you're running out of the room. This is your immediate reaction. Get out. The horse will stay. And so that gives you a lot of room to play with things, but both forcing your human characters or intelligent characters to react differently than what they would, and to set off this wonderful chain of events, because animals will do things that humans would never do. And it creates a lot of fun.
And it's important to remember that when you're writing, because I've even had, in the Alien series, I have a lot of animals, and many of them are very, very intelligent. And some of them can go chameleon, and some of them just sort of disappear. And one of the main supporting characters is complaining, like, why didn't the animals do something? And my main character, Kitty, who's the one who can talk to them, literally goes, because they're animals. They don't think like we do. Okay, they have a job, and they know what their job is, and they're doing their job, and they're keeping an eye, but we're acting like that person was a good person. So what are they supposed to do? Run up and bite it? You know? So I think it's really important that you make your animals do animal things. And if they're not, there needs to be a reason that makes sense in your situation, whatever the situation in your book is. If you're in a fantasy world, things can be very different than if you're in something that's grounded in reality. So there's a lot of leeway in what you can get away with, and or shouldn't get away with.
But even in a fantasy world, you want your fantasy animals connecting with people by having enough familiar, recognizable behaviors and traits that they, have this, I want to say, reality for the reader. So one of the things when I was doing my Facebook group today, I asked them, what things you like and what things bug you about seeing animals in stories. And one of the things that came up was people who felt like, for example, shifter creatures were too far from the actual animal that they were supposedly shifting into. There was this real desire that even with this magical creature, they wanted to see that connection to the familiar, the connection to the natural animal in some behaviors and senses and experiences and reactions, because that made it feel much more real. And the further away you get from that, the more people, I think, have a little bit of trouble connecting with those magical creatures. I mean, maybe they're a complete alien, but if you're saying that it is connected to some existing species, then you really want to be pulling in those characteristics that we all associate with that species to give it that concrete reality in your story.
Especially since it's so easy to research things now. I mean, here, random trivia fact. Did you know that the mountain lion is the largest cat that can still purr? Mountain lions can purr, tigers and lions cannot. And it's like, oh, cool. Well, this means I can have my cougar purring, but the one that turns into a tiger can only chuff because he can't purr. And it's like those little things that will just grab people, but will really throw them out all of a sudden if you throw something in that they can't do.
Yeah.
To get back to something that was said earlier, and that is, how do you choose which animal you use for your fictional purposes? And so, Becky, do you want to give us do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it was interesting. I had a contest in my last release, Murphy Cinderella. I knew I wanted a pet, and it was for a child. And so I had a contest, and I asked my readers to submit all these kinds of animals. And it was interesting because we had a menagerie of different kinds of animals, and the readers chose a ferret. And so I came up with a ferret, and then what I tried to do, all the contestants, I wanted to, you know, honor the fact that they had submitted something. So what I did is I made the little girl choosing different things too. So somebody had said a rabbit, so, you know, the neighbor tried to give her a rabbit, and then, you know, there was a puppy and somebody else had a puppy. So I tried to bring in every animal that could possibly be, this child could choose, but she ended up choosing the ferrets because it was a reader contest, and that reader had won.
Yeah, I mean, we had a character that was transformed. She was like half. She was basically a creature that was half human and half not, and she considered herself a monster. She didn't, you know, she was like half homunculus and half, you know, real. But the pet we gave her, and it was one of the lead character, Simon, decided he was going to give her something that would help her bridge that, to show her that, you know, that it's okay to be something that's not normal. And we chose a hedgehog because they're bristly, they don't look quite right. And she, you know, and he kind of pulled it out of a magic hat and gave it to her, and she like looked at it and she was like, and she couldn't speak at that point. She could only use like a little music box to kind of communicate with some sound. But it was something that, you know, a cat or anything else probably went, you know, I could have made it fit, but I felt that because it was prickly, it was not natural. It had these little bristly spines, that it was more akin to what she thought herself as, that she was this abnormal creature that no one was going to love. And that made the connection, we felt, better than giving her a cat or a dog or a bunny or something fluffy. So sometimes for me, it's always the character, what they need at that moment, what would make that character move past what event they're trying for. So to me, it usually is much more well chosen. It's a very conscious choice of what animal is going to get into the story.
Yeah, I was, you know, with Greyflowers, it always struck me the cats and vampires would be perfect together simply because cats don't give an F.
They don't give an F, and they would bite him, and he didn't care. You know, they could crawl all of him. He doesn't feel like, he doesn't take any notice of the feral cats because none of them are ever happy. And, you know, it was nice because he could pet it, even though he couldn't sense the petting, he could hear the purring. And so that he knew that if he just stroked it, it would start the purr. And that's what he kind of liked, was the sound, not so much the tactile touch, because he had none. So again, it was something that was very specific that we thought would be a great thing for him to have, a whole castle full of feral cats. And he really didn't care about them, but he found out humans did.
Oh yeah, we care about them a lot.
We care a lot.
Paige, how do you choose your, you know, what are the important things to consider when you're choosing to put an animal into a story, assuming the animal doesn't tell you, hey, I'm coming in now, you can write it around me? Paige?
I mean, a piece of it is also what they can take care of. It's very frustrating to see someone, you know, giving a dog to a character for the cuteness factor when the character's life is not in a situation where taking care of a dog is really going to work. And again, one of my readers was complaining about a movie they'd seen where one of the main characters had a big dog and ended up going off to someone else's house for the night and not, you know, in the movie making any kind of arrangements for the dog. And then when they got home, the first thing he did was not to clean up pee and poop on the floor and take the dog out. So, you know, again, that can alienate readers if you give an animal to a character and don't take into account what kind of life the character is going to give that pet. So you can have the cute scenes, but if your readers are thinking, wait a minute, he works in the ER for 12 hours at a stretch, what's happening when this pet is home? You know, you give him a single cat and don't give him another cat to play with it. You know, these kinds of things. So making that choice is not just about what the character would like and who they would interact well with, but also what will your readers look at and say, yeah, that's a good fit in that person's life. You know, that works.
Gini?
How they come in, most of the cases they come in just because I have most of my characters, animals included, are like, oh, I'm here, enjoy, right? So, kill surprise, you were prepared. But at the start, I gave in Touched by an Alien, Kitty's parents have dogs and cats, like 4 dogs and 2 cats, and she's always had dogs and cats. But Kitty has fish because she doesn't have time to take care of them or interest. The animals she loves at that time are at her parents' house. She has fish. As she calls it, it's living decor that needs my attention. Yes, I'm sure some people love fish, but I'm not one of them. Okay, so I gave her fish. I gave her, there's a big scene about the fish too. It's like, but I had friends that loved their fish, and I was like, you do you. I'll take this cat over here, thank you. So in most cases, the animals show up, but when I am starting, like when I'm starting a new series or a new short or whatever, and I want to decide, will there be an animal? The question is, what kind of animal is appropriate, right? So like in my Belter series, which is set in the far future in the Belt, not a lot of animals because it is, you're living in space. It's not easy to have an animal. So the rare animal that shows up is a big deal, right? But on anything set on good old planet Earth, then it's pretty much everything Kaje said. What can this character handle? What should this character handle? What's going to work best with the story as it's coming out? Are you doing a mystery where you're going to be investigating things? Hey, maybe a dog, right? Wouldn't a dog be great? Because it can come along and be a little bit of protection and bark at the wrong times or bark at the right times, you know? So I think it's really important, you know, it's, I have characters that's like, they love horses. She brings her horses with her everywhere, but they act like horses. But she loves her horses. So she brings them everywhere because she's not going to leave them on a ranch to somebody else. When she's going somewhere this way, she's got the nice horse trailer. So again, it's really what Kaje said. You have to think about how the animal fits into the character's lifestyle that you want, that they either have or you want them to have. If you want someone to get out of their, you know, whatever, and you give, you know, they're in this tiny apartment and there's this poor big dog that needs rescuing, well, and you want them moving out of you, the author, want them moving out of the apartment. Well, now they've got this giant dog, and you know, if they love the dog, they're going to be like, maybe we need a yard, maybe we need to do something. So they can be motivators, but that whole, like you said, they come home, the first thing they do is not clean up a destroyed house covered with dog crap and a howling, sobbing animal. That's a fantasy book. That somebody threw in an animal like it was a cardboard cutout, like, oh, they have children. Yeah, they're off there somewhere taking care of themselves. It doesn't work like that.
No, okay. You had in Twisted Luck a parade, if you will, of animal
lots of animals.
How did you decide, you know, which animal to use?
Oh, there was no deciding. Every single one of them shoved their faces in. That there was. Carillion has actually been around in a couple incarnations, and this is just the incarnation he settled in. And a lot of it's just as animals are usually familiar. It's part of the trope with that entire universe is most of the familiars look like animals, but if you actually investigate them, they're never earth mammals or reptiles or anything else. They're always slightly off. So I now want to write a story in Gini's space universe and have somebody selling pet cockroaches. Because those would be the perfect space pets. All these hissy Madagascan cockroaches.
I actually have space cockroaches in the steampunk universe on that.
See? They're awesome pets.
They're not pets, they're pests. They get eaten by the food.
Yes, they are, says the woman who has to have the exterminator over tomorrow for the ads. Really, I mean, I think they're wonderful creatures. They're they do so many good things for the universe. Can't they do them outside the house?
Oh, no.
Look at Wally. Wally was the perfect example of having a cockroach be a wonderful character in a movie, and I would have never thought that, but he was in a movie.
His pet, yes.
Well, no, there's
Exactly, that was
actually
Wally's pet, and it worked really well.
in China or Hong Kong.
It was awful. Yeah.
They actually sell the hissing cockroaches as pets.
Yeah.
So that they actually.
Yeah.
That are rats. Rats are everywhere.
Yeah, that anyway.
I'll take a rat because that can be domesticated.
They can be. They actually like being domesticated. They like being clean. It's like, you know, who knew? Anyway.
Rats are intelligent. I'll go for
they
rats.
are. In fact, kudos to rats who are doing things like sniffing out landmines in war-torn countries. So, yeah. Yes. But, you know, also, we've talked about a lot of things, and, you know, many of us are science fiction and fantasy writers, but, you know, some of us write mysteries and romance and things where it really would sort of blow the mood if you had a giant ruby-colored cat talking in your head, because that's not what we expect in the normal universe. Well, it is normal in your universe, Melanie.
I was going to say it's normal in mine too.
Yes, that's true.
Well, it's normal in my bedroom at home. Okay, I've got
I'm going. This is just a litmus test for any significant other you're with. If they can't handle your animals talking in their heads, they're obviously not the right person for you.
Right.
This is true.
If they can't handle your dogs at the side of the bed like this, staring, then they're probably not going to make it.
No,
a wet nose on the butt when you're.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, hey. I got stories. I'll tell you guys when we're not being recorded.
I was trying to get at the fact that, you know, how do things change when you're writing animals for different genres? Because, you know, we've all written multiple genres. So how do you treat your animal? How do you fictionally treat your animals differently?
Honestly, for me, the biggest difference is when I'm writing mundane stuff where, i.e., the animals are not sentient, they have to actually deal with emptying the litter box, taking them out for whatever. That's the joy of sentient animals. They know how to use the bathroom.
One hopes. For
me, For me, it's all the animals, you know, again, they're animals regardless of the series. But yeah, the ones that when I have a character who has a Dr. Dolittle talent, it's a very different situation than it's somebody who, you know, managed not to run the stray dog over. And now it's you know, it's cute and it's sweet and it's clearly been dumped. What are they going to do? Well, of course, that dog is now going to be living with them, right? But the dog has to act differently because it can't talk to the human. It can't hear that human's thoughts and get in on that wavelength. So it has to act like a dog. Is it a well-behaved dog? Is it a wild dog? You know, is it a rambunctious dog? Is it, you know, very sedate? And you have to make the determination for the dog, because now once you got the animal, it has to have character too. It has to be as three-dimensional as your characters. The animal helps create the third dimension on your human characters or your other characters that are interacting with it, because if they could be robots, right? But the animal has to be three-dimensional too. You know, it is going to go if it doesn't have an option for a litter box or where to go. And if you have to deal with it, you don't have to show them doing it, but you do have to have, you know, somebody assigned to walk that dog, right? Somebody's cleaning out the litter box. So I just think the further away you get from science fiction and fantasy, the more real, or horror, because in horror and your animals can turn into terrible things. Because the farther you're getting away from science fiction, fantasy, horror, the more real and grounded in reality your animals should be, or else they're gonna, you know, we're all gonna be calling Cage, going, "Oh my God, I found another one!" Right? This dog was singing, and it's not even supposed to be a fantasy. So
another issue is historical, because you know, animals in the past were not treated the way that we do these days. And while you want your characters to be sympathetic, if you're riding a turn of the century cowboy, they are not going to treat either the cattle or their horse in exactly the same way that we would these days. They're not going to treat their dog in the same way. You know, if you're riding historical, those cats are going to be out on the street, you know, and they're going to toss scraps out the door sometimes, but they're not being brought in and provided with, you know, catnip and the toys. So one of the aspects of what do you do with your animals in your stories also is going to depend on what era are you writing. And it's not just a matter of is your character sympathetic, but they should be sympathetic within the bounds of what you could expect for, you know, that time period that they're living in.
I think it depends on your character, even in contemporary, because if I'm writing a show horse world, which I used to show horses, in that world, we treated our horses a lot different than when I ran the ranch. And that horse on that ranch was a lot, you know, I even brought one from the show ring to the ranch, but he had a different function then on that time. And there was a different relationship, and he had more of a job. It wasn't just a show. And it was a matter of what I was doing with him, you know, how much, you know, he wasn't under a blanket all the time, you know, how much did I clip him, you know, these types of things. So if you really are familiar with your animal, it's a totally different thing based on who owns the animal and how that relationship is. And it's, you know, it's kind of like talking about the farm, you know, there are people that think that those cute little heifers are cute, you know, and you go to a rescue somewhere, it's a whole different story than if I'm raising 300 cows and, you know, I've got 10 heifers I'm going to keep and the rest of them are going to slaughter. I mean, it's totally different. So I think it also depends on, you know, what your character, where that character is and what they do, what's their occupation, I guess it would be.
Well, and there's also the fact that animals are intelligent in different ways than humans. There's a great video out there, you can go find it. The guy was doing a bridle competition in a rodeo, which is where you're doing all of these tricks with the horse. Well, he started out and something happened and the bridle literally fell apart. I mean, the bridle dropped to the ground. The horse sat there and ran the entire course, didn't even blink, because he knew exactly what he was supposed to do, with the guy sitting on his back going, well, I mean, he was disqualified because he didn't do what they called for. But that horse is just trotting along doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So animals can be really intelligent, but if you're expecting the horse to do something a human would, you're going to fail and the story's going to fail. But if, you know, like my cat has figured out how to open the door to my bedroom. He is tall enough and big enough, he can reach up and pull the handle down so he can get into the bedroom. That's fine, but he's not going to use it the same way a toddler would.
Right.
Well, I had a cat who used it the same way a toddler would. Our first cat, basically, Greg said, cat not going to be in the bedroom sleeping with us. No way, no sir. So we closed the door. Wah, wah, wah. And finally I would give in. Gotta stop giving in. Okay, so next night we closed the door. Click. In comes the cat, jumps on the bed. Cuddle with mom and dad. See, you didn't close the door. I did close the door. Next night, I'm closing the door. Click. In comes the cat. Third night, he said, no, this is just a chance. I'm going to really close it. And you're going to double check it. Yeah. Right into the bed with us. So I would say that, you know, some cats do act exactly like
toddlers.
We had the latch things, and we actually had to switch to an actual doorknob, because if my cat had a thumb, he would have figured it out. But every time you hear him going, because he knows how to turn the knob.
I have a doorknob. I have a doorknob.
He
turns the doorknob.
It was doorknob.
Mine figured out how to go on a shelf and put his weight to turn it, because he didn't have the strength to turn it this way. So he walked up and then turned it down. They know exactly what they're doing.
Oh yeah, no, ours had been declawed before we got him, and so you would think that would slow him down. No, that he was a big 14-pound Tom, and he just had it every time. So Susan, you know, have you, you've written in various genres, and have you and Clay had to, how have you changed the way you portray the animals in the various genres that you've written?
I mean, in the historical fantasy, most of them were non-magical. They were actually, the world was magical, but the animals rarely were. We're working now with some newer stuff where we are doing what Clay's got, like a talking bear in Hollywood, and I can't wait to see what he's doing with it, because I think we're actually switching up quite a bit. But when we were writing previously, it was very much a keeping it real, doing the research. If we didn't know, like we knew nothing about hedgehogs, so we had to do a lot of research on hedgehogs. But cats, dogs, horses, we knew, but we have to be like super careful. Like, I'm not going to put a horse in and it be, like they say, a pet. It can be if that was the horse I wanted, but we want to be very specific with what we were using and when. In a new story, I've got a Mustang, and that Mustang is much different than a regular horse that you would get, from, a breeder or something. This is a horse that knows the terrain, that knows what it's doing. He knows what danger is. He's very conscious of it. And you have the rider listening more to how the horse is reacting, because he knows the horse is going to react a hell of a lot quicker than he ever will. Not in terms of aggression. He's not going to run, but he knows that if that horse stops and the ears go up and he's like shying, he knows something evil is in the area. And a regular horse is going to be flying, and this one may fly too if the wrong thing happens. So it's a lot of being research and knowing what you're dealing with. I raised horses for many years, and there's those horses that are very placid, and then there's horses that are not. We had one that follow you like a puppy dog, and then another one that would bite you the minute you turned your back on her, because that's just what she did. And she was a very angry horse that we got from an abuse. She was very abused when she was young, and we had to work through that abuse to earn her trust. And these are all things you have to consider when you're writing both real and fantasy. The fantasy stuff is a lot more fun because you can kind of play a little bit, but we still want to ground it. Like Kate said, you have to ground it in reality in some way for the reader to empathize with it, and to connect with it. So,
and there's also differences. It's
yes.
Like, Susan, did you do mostly Western stuff?
No, actually, I think we did a little bit with Deadlands back in when we were first
I mean the horses.
Oh,
Western.
I did English actually, and then went to Western later. But it was, there's the way you would ride a quarter horse with Western is very different than you would ride a standardbred with.
See, and I grew up totally Western. That's all we did. That's all anybody knew. One of my friends does dressage, and we started talking. I didn't realize that there was this whole different world of how you rode horses,
yes,
how you reined them, because everything I grew up in technically farm country, so everything was Western. And it is like these two separate worlds that the only thing they have in common is there's a horse.
Yep.
And it's little things like that can throw a reader who knows anything completely out of the story. So it's really funny.
We raced them. We did harness racing as well, and the whole mindset between that for the horse boat and for the rider is completely different. And you really got to make sure that when you're researching and what animal you're bringing into, what kind of horse it's going to be, what the temperament's going to be, how it's going to react to certain situations that you're going to be putting it into. It's a lot to consider. Fantasy you can play with a little bit. We've had werewolves, we've had were dogs, we've had everything that we can play with. But it's a delicate balance, and you really want to make sure that you keep the reader engaged, but you don't want to throw you don't want that animal or that animal character to throw the reader out of the story. And they can just as quickly and easily do that, and to kind of ground it into some bits of reality, like Kate said, but still have fun with it, but don't go so far, so alien, so out of the box that they can't quite understand. And make sure you research. God forbid, don't ever walk away from doing research on any animal that you're choosing. and what situation you're going to put it in.
One of the things I did a workshop for riders on horses, and one of my big things, you know, depending on if you're talking about American Quarter Horse or if you're talking about show horses, any breed that you go with, there are several breeds that call the colors different. You know, you have a chestnut and thoroughbreds, but you may go to a Western horse and they'll call it a sorrel. And so you have to be careful. What's the difference of it? And it's the color of the mane and the tail. And there's a lot of little nuances there that can really blow your book out of the water if you're not paying attention. So, you know, I would imagine that it might be the same with other animals, but I can tell you it is very specific with horses. And again, like you were talking about, I rode in 8 disciplines, and all of those were different saddles and different types of riding. And it's not the same. You don't train the horse the same. The cues are different. And so you have to, you have to do your research because it is very specific.
One of my readers on that, when I asked that question, said that the thing that they that threw them out of the book the most was if somebody like tied a horse up with a bridle with the bit in their mouth, or you know, called a bridle a halter. So sometimes even just the basic terminology.
Right. Well, you can, you know how many bridles you can have? You know how many bits? I had 100 bits, 100, and that's not all of them. And I used every one of them for a different thing. So it's you know, like I said, it's very specific. So you really have to do your research if you're going to go that deep. It just depends on what if your character is a trainer and that she's a dressage trainer, or if she's a quarter horse trainer, or if she rides gymkhana and does stuff like, I don't know, barrels or poles or something like that. It's all different. And every one of those has different tack, different types of horses, different breeds of horses, different colors of horses that may look the same. They may all be brown, but they're called something different. All of that is that you really got to research on those items.
So I'm curious, how many of you have killed off a really, like not just a random animal that popped onto the scene for 30 seconds, but something that was an animal character in your books?
Killed it.
Killed it.
Did I hear that right?
Yes,
I want to keep my readers.
Very famously killed a horse.
Book 8, Alien
and everybody
Research,
gets on her case still 10 years later about.
I still hear it. Book 8, keep in mind it's book 17 that I'm working on right now. Book 8, aka the bloodbath, starts with the bloodbath starts with the death of an animal heretofore considered unkillable. And I still hear about it. You killed a poof. Killed a poof. My agent read it, and the first words out of my mouth, "You killed a poof," and I'm like, I do not need this from you. My editor, first words out of her mouth, "You killed a poof." I'm like, I don't need to hear it from you either.
So
I'm dead. I'm sorry. You know, humans die
issues with
time too, but it's but the reason for its death was very significant. It was very important, and it really showed, without me having to say, "Oh, those people are irredeemable," that those people were irredeemable.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I handled John Wick's dog being killed mainly because they didn't go too much into it. But I was reading this. Yeah, I was reading the sci-fi series, and honestly, I was really enjoying it. And I'm going through the series, and we're like literally halfway through the book, and this guy does a flashback talking about his dad killing his cat. And I went, okay, that's fine. He then decides to describe how his dad, and I went, nope, you're done. I would have been fine with just mentioning it. I could say, okay, bad things happen. Let's go on. But the fact that the author stopped to describe something that, at least in my view, did not raise the stakes at all. We're talking about something that happened 20 years ago. His dad is dead. The cat is dead. Half of the planet is dead. All it did was make me unwilling to consider reading or continue reading because I don't need that trauma. At least for me, if I'm killing an actual character, like if I killed Carillion, Not only would half the world skin me at this point, but it would be the same as me killing a person, because he is a person. But if you just kill a poor defenseless animal and you glorify it too much in the story without there being an absolutely incontrovertible, no way to do this scene any other way, I think you're going to lose a lot of readers, mainly because you're going to lose me. I mean, you can say, oh, I killed the dog and ate it. If it's a dystopian, awesome, that's fine. Go on. You describe killing the dog and then how you cook it. Nope, you went too far. I don't need this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, we're coming up. This is, as always with you guys, this is going really, really fast, and we're coming up close to the end of the hour. And so I've got a couple things that need to get done. And the first one is I'm going to go around the room, if you will, and ask you, what is the one thing people who plan to write animals into their work shouldn't do, and what should they do? You can take them in either order. I think we've started with that, talking about eating dogs, Mel. So I'm going to let you go. What should writers do? They should do when they write animals, and what should they absolutely not do?
If they write an animal into the story, don't just make it window dressing. Oh, I have a snake. If that pet isn't there as a pet where you have some level of emotional commitment to it, don't bother. Say they have a nice piece of artwork on the wall. It's easier. What they should do is the animal almost always needs to have some level of agency. I have never yet, even the most well-trained pet in the world, never obeys all the time. They have some agency. They're going to do things to either amplify or de-amplify the plot. And if they aren't affecting the plot at all, again, I have a nice piece of artwork on the wall. So.
Okay. Susan?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that immensely. The first thing is do your research when you're choosing an animal. Don't choose it arbitrarily. It's so, as a historical writer, to me, researching that and knowing your animal, knowing its traits, its habits, do a lot of discussion with folks who have. I mean, consult with people that will have that knowledge. If you don't know and the books aren't telling you that, talk to Becky. She will tell you on horses. I mean, it's vital to have that accuracy in there. And to me is never put a character of an animal into a story just to have one in there. They need to have, be there. John Wick's dog is there as a catalyst. Your horse in Red Dead Redemption is there so you can be a better person. And when it happens at the end, it is traumatic, but it moves the story and you understand why, because to make the characters that have done this to be the villain. There has to be a reason for this animal to be there. If it's just a fish, somebody's got to feed it. You can't just walk away from it. It's got to be a reason, and you've got to make sure that you have the staff involved in the story to help care for it. If your character's running off for weeks and being trapped in a pyramid, something's going to be left behind, and that dog or that cat or that fish is going to be conscious of it. Don't just throw them in because they're fun to have in there. They're now in there. Never forget it.
They're part of the world. Okay, Becky.
Yep. I guess we've touched on that, and that is always to do your research. I to this day will rarely read anybody's ranch story because they're not authentic, and it drives me a little bit crazy. I mean, the minute something goes wrong, I'm just like a little bit nutcase there. So especially do your research. The thing to do, I love to use the animal to, like I said, to show the human character. And I think to me, that's the number one thing that the animal does is, shows the human character and gives another aspect to that character. So that's why I like to use animals in my story, especially with little children. I think, animals are essential to little children growing up. And so I think it's helpful usually, you know, in a story with a family setting, you've got a child that usually will, or typically may have a problem that they're working out. So the animal helps that child along with that. That's a fun tool to use.
Okay. Jenny?
Don't put in an animal that you don't like unless the character also doesn't like them, and you and the character are going to learn to like this animal throughout the story, and that's part of the point of the story. But like, I'm terrified of snakes, so the snakes that show up in my stories are usually there to be killed, sorry, or to be run away from, or to be there to show that a character isn't afraid of them. Okay, but they're not. I have one mystery that it isn't published yet, but in it, there's a supporting character that has a pet boa, and another supporting character picks up the boa and it's like, oh, he's so sweet, right? Because she and my heroine are like the only two women on the set not afraid of a snake, right? That's the only reason that's the reason that snake there. It's there to do other things to move the plot along, but it's not the pet that my heroine is going home to cuddle with. And so don't put in something that you hate, because people who love that will know everything about it and will feel your hatred. So don't do that. But otherwise, I would say do embrace putting in some kind of animal. It's similar to, I tell people I'm working with, you know, remember taste, smell, touch. We focus a lot on vision and some on hearing, but we have 3 other senses that get ignored a lot, and the sense of smell tends to not get talked about a lot in description. And as soon as you add a little scent, it makes the scene fuller. And it's that kind of thing. Add in an animal as another sense, but understand that it's a 3-dimensional creature that if it's there, it has to be there like it would be in reality.
And that involves a lot of smell usually.
Litter box.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, even without, I mean, lizards, snakes, they have their own smell. Birds, all of them. And
Wet
that's
dog.
even when you don't get into the defecation part of it. Kaje, do's and don'ts.
Yeah. Speaking of smell, no, you can overdo the realism. So being aware that you're trying to balance these things out, you want your animal character to feel genuine. You want it to have flaws. You want it to be at times a burden on your human characters. So it's not always a boon, and there are going to be times when you know, it's a demand that maybe interferes with what the human wants to do, but you can't overdo it. I have this book that I wrote. It's called Love and Lint Rollers. This guy has 6 cats and picks up a 7th as a rescue, and it's one too many. But one of my beta readers, when reading it, said, there are too many litter boxes in this romance. I was being very conscientious with 7 cats of making sure that my character's home wouldn't stink too much for the person who was becoming his significant other, and making sure that I was showing that, you know, the interactions with cats and the difficulties, and that he was taking care of them and so on. But you can apparently overdo how much of the real you put in there. And so I removed several litter box references from my story. The things to do, you know, again, you're looking at what the animal is there for in your story. You want to make sure that they're not a plot muppet, and that they don't also overwhelm your human characters, because there are books that I've read where I remember the animal and I have no clue about the humans and the romance that was supposedly in there and so on. The pieces that I still recall are the animal. And while that may, you know, pull people to your book, you want to make sure that they are there to serve your human character's development and plot. I mean, unless you're writing something where the animal is the main character, they should be there as a tool that makes people empathize with, understand love and want to follow the humans that are the center of your story. And so they should have that function as, you know, not just their own independence, but, you know, a functionality that makes people love your human characters more.
Okay, cool. All right, we unfortunately have come to the end of our time together, so I'm going to ask everybody to basically tell folks what your current story or book is and where they can find you on the web. Kaje, start us out.
So in terms of recent releases, my most recent release is in my Necromancer series, and that came out in January. But I have a bunch of things in the works, including Rockstar Romance, and I have a short story actually that's coming out on the 27th, I believe, and a story called Seeds of Love. It's a Ukraine benefit anthology of short romance pieces with the proceeds going to Ukrainian support charity. So that'll be the next thing out. And finding me online, probably your easiest bet is look me up on Facebook, my Facebook group. I do a lot of flash fiction and I'm there just about every day. So good place to locate me.
Okay, great. Susan?
We're right now working on a short story for Lou Anders' Throne and Bones series. He's got a new RPG world that he's promoting, and we're writing some short stories for that. You can find Clay and I at clayandsusangriffith.com. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Clay and Susan, or you can find us individually as well. I'm at Susan Z. Griffith, and I think Clay's Clay Griffith. I think it's pretty simple. And you can find us on Twitter as well.
Becky?
Oh, I didn't hear you. Sorry. You can find me at becketurner.com, and I spell my name B-E-C-K-E. That's how a first grader does it anyway, and that's kind of stuck. And I've got a new release coming out, and it's Murphy's Choice, and it features a terribly unattractive dog named Handsome. And it's going to come out in May, or late June, I should say. Late May or June.
Okay, that works. That works. Mel?
You can find me at badashpublishing.com or on Facebook as Mel Todd. And I just sent the book 6 to my betas. So if I can get everything back and get it edited, it should be out late May, early June for book 6 of the Twisted Left stories. And I am in 2 anthologies going right now. One is It Came from the Trailer Park, which is a redneck version of What Did They Do When Aliens, Zombies, or Whatever invade. And another Beast Whisperer story, which is a little small world I'm running in Keen Edge of Valor by CKP.
Okay, great, great. And Ginny and friend.
This is Dash. The other one was Leo. I've been recording too long, and the dogs want mommy. You can find me at my website www.ginikoch.com. On Facebook, on Twitter, on Pinterest. It looks like I'm on Instagram, but I'm really not. So please don't try to find me there. My most recent releases are all anthologies. I have a story in Silence in the City, writing Z.E. Stanton. I have a story in The Reinvented Detective, writing as Anita Ensall, which is just out. And I have a story writing as myself in Predator, Eyes of the Demon, that is coming out next month.
Well, thank you all for your insights into how to write and how not to write about animals in your fiction. And we hope that you out there viewing us have enjoyed this. We certainly enjoyed hosting you here and hope you'll join us again here at ConTinual, the convention that wants to be where you are, wherever you are. Seriously. Thank you for joining us here at ConTinual, and we hope you'll join us again. Good night.